The Janitor Who Noticed. For 14 years, Benjamin Wallace had worked at Springdale Elementary, a modest school nestled at the edge of a tree-lined suburban neighborhood. The building was surrounded by manicured lawns, cheerful bulletin boards taped to windows, and the soft hum of early morning sprinklers. It was the kind of place where nothing truly bad was supposed to happen, where children skipped to school with backpacks bouncing and teachers carried coffee mugs adorned with apples and inspirational quotes. Ben wasn't a man of many words. He was the janitor, the guy with the mop, the bucket, the keys, and the quiet routine. Most staff greeted him with a nod. Some called him sir, out of habit or awkward politeness. Students barely noticed him unless they spilled something or had a clogged sink to report. He liked it that way. Invisibility had its perks. It let him observe without being observed, listen without being asked to participate, fix without drawing attention. He saw everything. Who came in early? Which kids sat alone during lunch? Which teachers rolled their eyes when students weren't looking? And he paid attention, really paid attention, especially to the kids others didn't notice. That's why he noticed the boy. It began like any other Tuesday morning. The cafeteria still smelled faintly of syrup from breakfast, and Ben was changing a light bulb near the teacher's lounge. Through the glass panel of classroom 2B, he noticed a small boy standing rigidly next to his desk. The other kids were seated, crisscross applesauce on the carpet, listening to a story. But not this one. He stood, arms clutched tightly across his chest, eyes fixed on the floor, back to the wall like he was afraid it might disappear. Ben might have brushed it off as a quirky habit. Some kids couldn't sit still, after all, but there was something off. The boy's legs trembled, a slight, involuntary shiver that didn't match the warm temperature in the room. His shoulders were tense, locked in a place, and his clothes hung awkwardly on his frame, too big in some places, too tight in others. It looked like they'd been picked from a thrift store bin by someone who didn't bother to check sizes. Ben didn't know the boy's name yet, but by lunchtime, he made it a point to learn it. Owen Daniels, the teacher, Mrs. Lafferty, said with a sigh when he asked. He's a little difficult, doesn't like to follow instructions, won't sit, avoids eye contact. The psychologist flagged him for oppositional defiance, but we're still documenting behaviors. Ben nodded but said nothing. He had seen enough troubled kids come and go to know labels were easier to apply than solutions. That afternoon, he noticed Owen again standing in the lunchroom, tray in hand, hovering near the far table but never sitting. He leaned against the wall as he picked at his food, flinching slightly when another kid bumped into him. His eyes darted around, like he was waiting for someone to call him out, to punish him, to make him sit. It was subtle, but Ben had learned to see the subtle. The next morning, Owen was by his cubby, struggling with the zipper on his backpack. His legs shook again. His shirt of faded green polo was wrinkled, its hem uneven. Ben approached slowly. "Morning," he said, keeping his voice low and even. Owen flinched. His head shot up briefly, then dropped again. "You okay, kid?" Ben asked. Owen hesitated, then mumbled so softly Ben had to lean in. "If I sit too long, the bruises come back." Ben's heart froze. For a moment, he couldn't move. "What bruises?" he asked gently. But Owen didn't reply. He grabbed the cubby's shelf, then darted into the classroom just as the bell rang. That night, Ben pulled out the old black notebook he kept under his sink at home, his quiet log of things that didn't feel right. He scribbled down everything. The trembling legs, the oversized clothes, the remark about bruises. He wasn't a teacher, not a counselor, not a mandated reporter, but he made it his silent mission to look out for the kids nobody looked out for. And Owen Daniels had become his mission. The school nurse confirmed what he feared. There was a concern filed last month, she told him. Neglect, maybe abuse. But CPS dismissed it after a home visit. Guardian says Owen makes things up. Manipulative behavior, they said. "Who's the guardian?" Ben asked. "Michael Connolly," she replied. "Used to coach high school football. Took Owen in 6 months ago." Ben didn't know much about Michael Connolly, but something about that profile set off warning bells. Over the years, he'd met foster parents who were saints and others who seemed more interested in the paycheck than the child. The ones who ran tight, angry homes. The ones who always had an excuse for every bruise. Still, Ben had no proof. Just the word of a frightened boy and a gut feeling that something wasn't right. 2 days later, while scrubbing the boys' bathroom during recess, he heard a thump, then a gasp. He paused. "Owen," he called, approaching the far stall. No reply. He pushed the door open. Owen was on the floor, curled into himself. His back was to Ben, and his shirt was stained with blood near the hem. Not a gushing wound, but red blotches that didn't look like a fall from the jungle gym. Not accidental. Not random. "Owen," he said softly, crouching down. The boy didn't look up, just whispered, "If I sit too long, I am lazy." Lazy kids get the stool. "The stool?" Ben asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Owen nodded, eyes still down. "Wooden stool. If I move, it leaves marks." Ben closed his eyes for a moment. Rage surged in his chest, but he kept it buried. For Owen's sake. That night, he didn't just write in his notebook. Describe the injuries, the blood, the mention of a stool, and with a heavy heart, he included a photo discreetly snapped of the bloodstain on Owen's shirt. It felt wrong, but he needed evidence. Something no one could dismiss as behavioral manipulation. He brought the report to the vice principal, MS. Renault. She nodded solemnly, said she'd send it up the chain. 3 days later, she called him in. "No action will be taken at this time," she said carefully. The CPS caseworker said Owen denied any fear. Guardian was cooperative. No visible injuries. Ben clenched his fists. "You saw the picture. This could be from rough play. Old wound. We can't push without more." That night, he stared at his notebook until the ink blurred. The next morning, he did something bold. He placed a small motion-activated camera in the janitor supply closet near the school's front doors. It faced the curb, where parents and guardians dropped kids off. He didn't tell anyone. For a week, nothing. Owen stepped out of the same gray truck each morning, shoulders tense, expression flat. The man behind the wheel, presumably Michael Connolly, never looked up. Then, on a rainy Thursday, Ben saw it. At 7:11 a.m., Owen exited the truck slowly. The man jumped out, yanked the backpack violently, slapped the back of Owen's head, then shoved the backpack into his chest. The boy staggered. Ben stared at the footage, sick to his stomach. He copied it onto a flash drive and drove to his sister's house that night. Diana Wallace was a juvenile advocate in the next county sharp, respected and not afraid of fight. When Ben showed her the footage, she didn't blink. "We'll make this stick," she said. "I promise." What followed was a whirlwind. Diana discovered that Michael Connolly's brother-in-law worked for the regional CPS office, that he'd personally dismissed multiple complaints, not just about Owen, but other foster kids who'd cycled through Connolly's home. The footage changed everything. A new caseworker was assigned. A police officer accompanied her on the next visit. Owen was removed from the home. But that wasn't the end. Owen had nowhere to go. Beds were full. Records listed him as high behavior. No family stepped forward. Ben paced for hours before he made the call. He didn't have a spare room. He wasn't rich. He'd never been a foster parent. But he had a safe apartment. A quiet space. A heart that couldn't let the boy be lost again. He applied. Within a week, after emergency checks and interviews, Owen was placed with him temporarily. When a caseworker dropped him off, Owen stood at the threshold of Ben's apartment and whispered, "If I sit, will I get in trouble?" Ben knethed. "Not here, kid. Not ever." That night, they watched an old Disney movie on a secondhand couch. Owen sat carefully at first, then slowly leaned back. The first time he fell asleep on the couch, curled under a blanket, Ben cried quietly in the kitchen. School staff noticed the change. No bruises, no trembling. A kid who still flinched but also smiled tentatively when someone asked how his day was. There were hurdles. Connolly appealed, claimed Owen made it all up. But Diana brought the video. The pattern of complaints. Testimonies from other fosters who had been dismissed before. The judge didn't need much convincing. Appeal denied. Charges filed. Spring came, soft and slow. Owen began sitting during circle time. Not for long, but long enough. He made a friend. drew a picture of a stool colored green with a smiley face, and gave it to Ben. "This one's safe," he said. "For sitting, not punishment." Ben hung it on his fridge. One day, walking out of school together, Owen paused at the car. "Can we watch a movie tonight?" "Of course," Ben said. "Couch is all yours." The boy nodded, and for the first time in months, maybe years, he smiled without fear.